I sat in the lobby's corner chair, clutching my worn portfolio while the blonde receptionist behind the marble desk rolled her eyes at my presence for the third time that morning. She saw me as just another desperate job seeker who didn't belong in this gleaming corporate tower. Little did she know, my father's signature was on the deed to this entire 50-story building, and she was about to learn the most humbling lesson of her career. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. If you've ever been judged by your appearance or made to feel small by someone who thought they were better than you, this story will resonate deeply with your soul. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because stories like this prove that respect should never depend on what someone appears to have. Let's dive into this incredible journey. My name is Valentina Rodriguez. And 6 months ago, I made a decision that would change my perspective on privilege, respect, and human dignity forever. Most people who know my family recognize the name Rodriguez from the business headlines. My father, Eduardo Rodriguez, built one of the largest commercial real estate empires on the West Coast. Starting with a single apartment building he purchased with his life savings 30 years ago, he now owns dozens of office towers, shopping centers, and luxury developments across 3 states. But here's what most people don't understand about my father. Success never changed his values. Despite his wealth, Eduardo Rodriguez remained the same humble man who once worked 3 jobs to support his family. He taught me that money should never make you forget where you came from, and that every person deserves to be treated with dignity regardless of their circumstances. These weren't just pretty words he'd say at charity dinners. They were principles he lived by every single day. Growing up in the Rodriguez household meant understanding the weight of responsibility that comes with privilege. While my friends were getting designer handbags for their 16th birthdays, my father was taking me to visit the families who lived in his affordable housing projects. He wanted me to see firsthand how his business decisions affected real people's lives. Mija, he would tell me, never forget that behind every rent payment is a family working hard to build their dreams. We are custodians of their hopes, not just landlords collecting checks. This philosophy shaped everything about how I was raised. Despite our family's wealth, I attended public schools, worked part-time jobs during high school, and was expected to earn my own spending money. My father believed that privilege without perspective was dangerous, and he was determined to ensure I understood the value of hard work and humility. When I graduated from Stanford with my MBA, he didn't immediately offer me a position in his company. Instead, he told me something that initially frustrated but ultimately enlightened me. Valentina, you have all the education and connections you need to succeed, but you're missing something crucial. You've never experienced what it feels like to be truly underestimated. You've never had to prove yourself when people assume you don't belong. Until you understand that struggle, you won't fully appreciate the responsibility that comes with our success. His words stung because they were true. I had lived a privileged life, and while I understood intellectually that not everyone had the same advantages, I had never personally experienced discrimination or dismissal. That conversation planted a seed that would eventually grow into the most eye-opening experience of my life. I decided to conduct my own social experiment, but not in the way you might expect. Instead of revealing my family connections and walking into a corner office, I chose to apply for entry-level positions at various companies around the city, including several buildings owned by my father's corporation. I wanted to experience the job market as just another recent graduate, without the safety net of my family name. I created a separate resume under my mother's maiden name, Valentina Morales. I removed all references to my prestigious education, my internships at major corporations, and certainly any mention of my family's business empire. Instead, I crafted the profile of a hardworking young woman from a modest background, with a degree from a local state university and experience working retail jobs to pay for school. The transformation was both liberating and terrifying. For the first time in my life, I would be judged solely on merit, without the invisible advantages that had always smoothed my path. The first few interviews were humbling in ways I hadn't anticipated. Suddenly, I was just another face in a crowded waiting room, competing with dozens of other candidates for positions that barely paid enough to cover rent in the city. I watched as hiring managers' eyes glazed over when they looked at my fabricated resume, clearly categorizing me as just another unremarkable applicant. It was a wake-up call about how differently the world treats you when you don't have obvious markers of success or connection. But the real education began when I decided to apply for a position at Meridian Tower, one of my father's most prestigious properties in the heart of downtown. The building housed several major corporations, law firms, and financial institutions. It was the kind of place where million-dollar deals were made daily, where power lunches determined the fate of entire industries. The irony wasn't lost on me that I would be interviewing to work in a building that would someday be part of my inheritance. Meridian Tower was everything you'd expect from a premium commercial property. The lobby featured soaring ceilings, imported marble floors, and modern art installations that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of the city, and every detail had been carefully designed to project success and sophistication. It was the kind of building that made visitors feel either inspired or intimidated, depending on whether they felt they belonged there. The company I was applying to was Henderson & Associates, a mid-sized marketing firm that occupied 3 floors of the tower. They were looking for a junior account coordinator, a position that would involve supporting senior staff with client projects, research, and administrative tasks. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was exactly the kind of entry-level position that thousands of recent graduates competed for every day. The salary was modest, barely enough to afford a small apartment in a decent neighborhood, but it offered the possibility of growth and learning. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I had researched the company thoroughly, preparing for the interview with the same intensity I had once brought to corporate strategy presentations. I studied their client list, their recent campaigns, their company culture and values. I practiced answering common interview questions, crafted thoughtful questions to ask about the role, and selected my outfit carefully to project professionalism without appearing to try too hard. Everything had to be perfect because, unlike my previous privileged experiences, I wouldn't get a second chance if I made a poor first impression. The morning of my interview, I stood in front of my mirror and barely recognized myself. Gone were the designer clothes, the subtle but expensive jewelry, the confident posture of someone who had never doubted their place in the world. Instead, I saw a young woman in a carefully chosen but affordable outfit from a department store. Someone who looked grateful for the opportunity rather than entitled to it. My hair was styled simply, my makeup minimal, and my accessories were the kind you'd find at any mall store. The transformation was complete, and for the first time, I truly looked like Valentina Morales rather than Valentina Rodriguez. As I rode the elevator up to the 42nd floor that morning, I felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement that was entirely new to me. This was what normal people experienced when they were pursuing opportunities that could change their lives. This was the anxiety of not knowing if you were good enough, the hope that maybe this time would be different, the determination to prove yourself despite the odds. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. The Henderson & Associates office was exactly what I expected. Sleek, modern, and bustling, with the energy of people working on important projects. The walls were lined with awards and framed advertisements from successful campaigns, and through the conference room windows, I could see teams of people engaged in animated discussions around whiteboards, covered with colorful sticky notes and marketing diagrams. It was the kind of environment where creativity and strategy merged, where good ideas could come from anyone, regardless of their title or tenure. But before I could even step into that world of possibility, I had to get past the reception desk. And that's where I encountered Brittany Ashford, the woman who would unknowingly teach me more about prejudice and assumptions than any business school case study ever could. Brittany was everything you'd picture when you heard the phrase corporate receptionist. Impeccably groomed, perfectly dressed, and absolutely convinced of her own importance in the company hierarchy. Her blonde hair was styled in flawless waves, her makeup was professionally applied, and her designer outfit probably cost more than most people spent on clothes in an entire year. From the moment I approached her desk, I could feel her assessing me, cataloging every detail of my appearance and finding me wanting. Her smile was practiced and empty, the kind of expression that conveyed politeness without warmth. When I explained that I was there for an interview with the hiring manager, her eyebrows rose slightly, as if she couldn't quite believe that someone like me had made it past the initial screening process. "You're here for the junior coordinator position?" she asked, her tone suggesting that there must be some mistake. "Are you sure you have the right company?" Henderson & Associates is a very prestigious firm, We work with Fortune 500 clients and maintain the highest standards of professionalism. The implication was clear. I didn't look like someone who belonged in their prestigious world. I confirmed that yes, I was indeed there for the interview and provided my name and the time of my appointment. Brittany checked her computer with exaggerated thoroughness, as if hoping to find evidence that I was in the wrong place. When she found my name in the system, her expression shifted to barely concealed disappointment. She printed out a visitor's badge with obvious reluctance and gestured toward the waiting area with the kind of dismissive wave usually reserved for unwanted solicitors. The waiting area was designed to impress leather chairs, marble coffee tables, and carefully curated magazines that showcase the company's work and industry recognition. But sitting there under Brittany's occasional glances, I felt like an intruder in a space where I clearly didn't belong. Other people came and went through the lobby. Employees returning from lunch, clients arriving for meetings, delivery personnel dropping off packages. I watched how Brittany interacted with each group, noting the subtle but significant differences in her demeanor. With the employees, she was friendly and familiar, asking about their weekends and sharing office gossip. With the clients, she was deferential and accommodating, ensuring they had everything they needed while they waited. With the delivery workers, she was brusque and efficient, treating them as interruptions to her more important duties. And with me, she maintained an air of skeptical surveillance, as if I might try to steal something or cause some kind of disruption. As the minutes ticked by, it became clear that Brittany had appointed herself as my unofficial supervisor. She found reasons to walk past the waiting area multiple times, each time giving me a look that suggested I was somehow out of place. When I pulled out my phone to review my notes one final time, she made a pointed comment about the importance of being present and focused during the interview process. When I adjusted my posture in the chair, she mentioned that first impressions were crucial in the business world. The real test of my patience began when the hiring manager was running late. What should have been a brief wait turned into an hour-long endurance test, with Brittany making increasingly pointed observations about my presence in their pristine lobby. She had positioned herself as the gatekeeper of respectability, and clearly, I wasn't meeting her standards. "You know," she said during one of her unnecessary trips past my chair, "I've been working here for 3 years, and I can usually tell right away who's going to be a good fit for our company culture. We have very high standards here. This isn't the kind of place where just anyone can walk in and expect to succeed." Her words were carefully chosen to sound helpful while delivering a clear message about my perceived inadequacy. I smiled politely and thanked her for the insight, which seemed to frustrate her. She was clearly expecting me to be intimidated or defensive, and my calm response didn't give her the reaction she was hoping for. But Brittany wasn't done with me yet. She had apparently decided that I needed a full education about why I didn't belong in their world. "Are you familiar with our client list?" she asked, settling into the chair across from me with the air of someone preparing to deliver an important lecture. "We work with companies like Titanium Industries, Apex Financial, and Morrison Luxury Hotels. These are serious businesses run by serious people. They expect a certain level of sophistication from everyone they interact with, including support staff." She paused to let that sink in, her eyes scanning my outfit once again. "The thing is, in this industry, image is everything. Clients form opinions in the first 30 seconds, and those opinions can make or break multi-million-dollar contracts. Everyone who works here has to understand that they're representing not just themselves but the entire company and all of our prestigious clients." I nodded thoughtfully, genuinely curious about where she was going with this impromptu presentation. "That makes perfect sense. I imagine it takes a special kind of person to maintain those standards consistently." "Exactly," Brittany said, clearly pleased that I was finally grasping what she considered to be obvious truths. "That's why we're so selective about who we hire. It's not enough to have the basic qualifications on paper. You need to have that indefinable quality that says success. You need to look like you belong in boardrooms and corner offices." She leaned forward conspiratorially, as if sharing insider knowledge. "Between you and me, I've seen a lot of people come through here thinking they could fake it until they make it. But clients can spot authenticity from a mile away. They can tell when someone is trying too hard, or when someone just doesn't have the background to understand their world." The irony of receiving this lecture about authenticity from someone who clearly judged people solely on surface appearances wasn't lost on me, but I maintained my interested expression and encouraged her to continue. "What would you say are the most important qualities for someone to succeed here?" Brittany's eyes lit up at the opportunity to share more of her wisdom. Well, education is crucial, but not just any education. You need the right kind of schools, the ones that teach you how to move in elite circles. Then there's family background. It's not everything, but it helps if you come from people who understand business and success. And of course, there's natural confidence that comes from knowing you belong in exclusive environments. She gestured around the elegant lobby as if it were evidence supporting her argument. This isn't the kind of place where someone can just learn on the job. You either have what it takes, or you don't. And usually, it's pretty obvious which category someone falls into. As she spoke, I began to understand that Brittany had constructed an entire worldview around these superficial markers of success. In her mind, there was a clear hierarchy of worth, and she had appointed herself as an expert in determining where people belonged on that hierarchy. She genuinely believed that appearance, background, and social markers were reliable indicators of a person's value and potential. What about people who might have had different opportunities growing up? I asked, curious about how she would respond to a challenge to her philosophy. Don't you think someone could develop those qualities through hard work and determination? Brittany's expression suggested that I had just revealed my fundamental naivete about how the world really worked. "Oh, sweetie," she said with patronizing sympathy. "That's a lovely thought, but the reality is that certain things can't be taught. Class isn't something you can acquire through effort. It's something you're born with or you're not." She stood up and smoothed her designer skirt, clearly feeling that she had delivered an important life lesson. "I'm not trying to be mean, I'm just being realistic. Some people are cut out for this level of business, and others are better suited for different kinds of work. There's nothing wrong with knowing your limitations." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of other visitors, a couple in expensive suits who were clearly there for a client meeting. I watched as Brittany's entire demeanor transformed instantaneously. Gone was the condescending lecturer, replaced by a polished professional who radiated warmth and competence. She greeted the visitors with genuine enthusiasm, offering them refreshments and ensuring they were comfortable while they waited. "Mr. and Mrs. Hamilton!" she exclaimed, rising from her chair with perfect posture and a brilliant smile. "How wonderful to see you again! I hope your flight from New York was pleasant. Can I get you some coffee or sparkling water while you wait for the team to finish setting up the presentation?" The contrast was so stark it was almost comical. This was the same woman who had just finished explaining to me why I didn't belong in their world, now demonstrating the exact kind of professional excellence she claimed was beyond my reach. She moved with fluid grace, anticipated their needs before they expressed them, and projected an aura of sophisticated competence that was undeniably impressive. When the Hamiltons were settled in a private conference room, Brittany returned to where I was sitting, but her energy had shifted. She seemed almost annoyed that I was still there, as if my continued presence was somehow diminishing the elegant atmosphere she had just worked to create. "You're still waiting?" she asked, checking her watch with obvious impatience. "Your interview was supposed to start over an hour ago. Maybe this is a sign that this isn't the right opportunity for you. Sometimes the universe has ways of telling us when we're pursuing the wrong path." I explained that the hiring manager had sent word through an assistant that he was delayed but would definitely see me today. Brittany's lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. "Well, I suppose if you're determined to wait, there's nothing I can do about that. But I have to tell you, punctuality is extremely important here. Starting your potential employment with a delayed interview doesn't exactly set the right tone." Her comment revealed yet another layer of her prejudiced thinking. Somehow the hiring manager's delay had become my fault, another piece of evidence that I wasn't serious or professional enough for their standards. In Brittany's mind, everything that happened around me was further confirmation of her initial assessment. As if to emphasize her point, she began making increasingly obvious displays of her own importance and competence. When the phone rang, she answered with crisp professionalism, handling multiple calls with apparent ease while managing the lobby traffic. When employees stopped by her desk with questions or requests, she demonstrated her knowledge of company procedures and her familiarity with office politics. "Sarah, the Morrison Hotel contracts are on Mr. Henderson's desk waiting for his signature," she told one passing colleague. "And don't forget that the Apex financial team wants to move their Thursday meeting to Friday because their CEO is flying in from London." She delivered this information with the confidence of someone who was indispensable to the organization's smooth operation. But even as she showcased her professional skills, she continued to find ways to emphasize my outsider status. When a delivery arrived that required a signature, she made a point of mentioning how important it was to verify the identity of anyone in the building. When an employee's guest arrived for a lunch meeting, she explained loudly how their visitor management system ensured that only authorized people had access to the office areas. "Security is so important in a building like this," she said, glancing meaningfully in my direction. "We work with such high-profile clients that we can't be too careful about who we let into our space. Everyone who belongs here understands that these protocols exist for good reasons." The message was unmistakable. I was being categorized as a potential security risk simply because I didn't fit her mental image of who belonged in their elite environment. It was a masterclass in subtle discrimination, the kind of behavior that maintains barriers without ever explicitly stating exclusionary policies. As the afternoon wore on, other job candidates began arriving for later interview slots. I watched with fascination as Brittany's treatment of each person varied dramatically based on her instant assessment of their worthiness. A young man in an expensive suit was greeted warmly and offered premium coffee while he waited. A woman with a designer handbag and obvious confidence received detailed information about the company's recent successes and growth plans. But when a candidate arrived wearing a less expensive outfit and carrying a worn briefcase, Brittany's demeanor shifted to barely concealed skepticism. She provided only basic information, directed him to the standard waiting area without offering refreshments, and made subtle comments about the competitive nature of their hiring process. "We receive hundreds of applications for every position," she told the nervous-looking candidate. "The people who succeed here are usually the ones who stand out immediately. Our management team can tell pretty quickly whether someone has the right combination of skills and cultural fit." It was becoming clear that Brittany saw herself as an unofficial pre-screener, using her position at the reception desk to reinforce what she perceived as appropriate hierarchies. In her mind, she was protecting the company from unsuitable candidates, maintaining standards that she believed were essential to their success. The most revealing moment came when a young woman arrived who clearly came from wealth and privilege. Everything about her screamed expensive education and family connections, from her perfectly tailored suit to her confident posture to the way she spoke about mutual acquaintances in the industry. Brittany's response was immediate and dramatic. "Oh my goodness, you must be here for the senior analyst position," she gushed, despite having no way of knowing which position the woman was interviewing for. "I can already tell you're going to love it here. The culture is amazing, and the opportunities for advancement are incredible. Let me personally walk you through some of our recent achievements while you wait." She spent the next 20 minutes giving this candidate a detailed tour of the lobby area, pointing out awards and accolades, sharing insider information about upcoming projects, and basically providing a personal orientation session. The contrast with how she had treated me couldn't have been more stark. When the hiring manager finally emerged from his office, apologizing profusely for the delay and calling my name, Brittany's expression went through several rapid transformations. First confusion, then disbelief, then barely concealed disappointment. She had clearly assumed that someone of my apparent background would be interviewing for a much lower-level position, if any position at all. "Mr. Chen is ready to see you now," she said stiffly, her earlier chatty demeanor completely evaporated. She handed me a visitor's badge with obvious reluctance and gestured toward the interior office doors. "He's in conference room B. Down the hall, second door on your right." As I stood to gather my portfolio and prepare for the interview, Brittany made one final attempt to assert her authority over the situation. "Just remember," she said in a voice loud enough for nearby employees to hear, "Mr. Chen has very high standards. He's interviewed dozens of candidates for this position, and he'll know immediately whether you have what it takes to succeed here." I thanked her for the information and walked toward the conference room, feeling her eyes on my back every step of the way. Behind me, I could hear her already beginning to process the next candidate in line, her voice taking on that familiar tone of assessment and judgment. The interview itself went better than I had dared to hope. Mr. Chen was intelligent, thoughtful, and genuinely interested in my ideas and perspective. We had a substantive conversation about marketing strategy, client relationship management, and industry trends. He asked challenging questions that tested my analytical thinking and creativity, and I found myself genuinely excited about the possibility of working on their upcoming campaigns. What struck me most was how different the atmosphere was once I moved beyond Brittany's gatekeeping. Inside the company proper, I was treated as a serious candidate with valuable potential contributions. My ideas were heard and considered, my questions were answered thoroughly, and my background was evaluated based on relevant qualifications rather than superficial appearances. "We'll be making our decision within the next few days," Mr. Chen told me as we concluded the interview. "I'll have our HR coordinator call you with next steps. Thank you for your patience with the scheduling delay today. I know waiting can be stressful, but I hope Brittany took good care of you." I assured him that everything had been fine, not wanting to create problems for anyone before I even knew if I had the job. But as I walked back through the reception area to return my visitor's badge, I couldn't help but reflect on the stark contrast between my experience with the actual decision-makers and my treatment by their self-appointed guardian. Brittany was on the phone when I approached her desk, but she held up one finger to indicate I should wait while she finished her conversation. Even this small gesture felt loaded with significance. I was being made to wait for her attention, reminded once again of my place in her perceived hierarchy. "How did it go?" she asked when she finally hung up, her tone suggesting that she already knew the answer and expected to be proven right about my unsuitability. "Very well, thank you," I replied, handing back the visitor's badge. Mr. Chen was very thorough and professional. Brittany's expression suggested that she found this response somewhat disappointing. "Well, I'm sure you did your best. Competition for positions here is incredibly fierce, so don't be discouraged if you don't hear back. Sometimes these things just aren't meant to be." As I walked toward the elevators, I could feel her watching me leave, probably already composing her assessment of my candidacy to share with colleagues. In her mind, she had fulfilled her unofficial role as cultural guardian, protecting the company from candidates who didn't meet her standards of worthiness. But what Brittany didn't know was that her behavior had been observed and noted by someone who would soon have the power to address it directly. What she couldn't have imagined was that her assumptions about background, class, and belonging were about to be challenged in the most dramatic way possible. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.